during their performances, and I think they really understand the need for this and really welcome the idea of this easier and I think quicker access for public input on the safety of the residents of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, the other individuals I'd like to make comment about are the many paramedics in this province who have worked and continue to work to promote our profession to the best of their abilities. In the early days, they've worked long hours and still had the energy to work after hours to bring this piece of legislation and work on making amendments to this piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, and they have to be recognized. Also, with that, I'd like to recognize the other professions in the healthcare system, Mr. Speaker, who have been a great supporter of the paramedics in this province, the nurses of this province, especially in my area, and the nurses that I have come in contact with and worked with over the years, especially at the Cobequid Centre, Mr. Speaker. They're one of our best supporters. And the other associations, like the firefighters of this province, the police officers of this province, have all stood behind us in trying to evolve our profession to the point where we're truly recognized in the province as an important aspect of the healthcare system, Mr. Speaker, because, I remember it wasn't too long ago, Mr. Speaker, that we found ourselves in a position where we had to make some difficult decisions when it came to trying to be recognized in this province, and definitely I know many members are aware of the labor dispute that we had many years ago, Mr. Speaker, and I know that this government, especially since I've been a member and sitting in this House, have said numerous times that they respect and are supportive of the paramedics, Mr. Speaker, but it wasn't that long ago when the true colors of the government party was shown, and the lack of respect and the lack of support back in a few years ago when we had our labor dispute, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, I was working the evening we decided to take those drastic steps, Mr. Speaker, to go on strike. I worked out of Sackville, the area that I live in, the area my family, my friends live in, and many of my supporters lived in. And I was working that evening when I left my base, Mr. Speaker. It was one of the hardest things I had to do was to walk out of that base knowing that I left my community, my family, and my neighbors somewhat vulnerable to potentially harm coming to them because I wasn't there in their time of need. But I came down here, Mr. Speaker, to this legislature. I actually sat right above me, Mr. Speaker, and watched intensely to the proceedings and to the debate that was going on that evening. And I remember some of the comments made by government members at the time, Mr. Speaker. I remember what the Minister of Health said at the time and many of the members here. And I remember the one thing that stands out in my mind today the most, Mr. Speaker, and many paramedics say this to me day after day, is that I remembered when this caucus, the NDP, were standing, fighting for our hopefully fair treatment in this province, Mr. Speaker, and I would definitely like to thank many of the members of my caucus for doing that at the time, especially the late leader of the past leader of the NDP. Mr. Robert Chisholm, who spoke passionately about our cause here in the legislature, Mr. Speaker. And it was definitely encouraging for us to hear this from my caucus, and I want to thank many of the members that are sitting here today that stood on their feet and supported us, Mr. Speaker. But the one thing I do remember was when I sat just right above me, Mr. Speaker, at that time, that how the government members weren't really paying much attention, Mr. Speaker. They were reading their papers, they were doing crosswords, and really weren't paying attention to what we felt was one of the most important things in our lives and in our careers, Mr. Speaker. And that's really one reason why I'm standing here today, Mr. Speaker, was the support and the commitment from this caucus during those times and the support they gave to us throughout the province in the time of our need. Like I said, Mr. Speaker, that was a difficult time for us, but we've surpassed that. We've come past that point now in the career, I think, or in the evolution of EMS in this province. And I hope truly that the words spoken by the Minister of Health and many of the members and government members now about the commitment and their support of the paramedics are true, Mr. Speaker, and I hope we can go on and proceed to really recognize the paramedics of this province. As we see in the title, Bill number 158, Mr. Speaker, an act respecting the practice of paramedicine. And that's all the paramedics been asking for in this province for many years, Mr. Speaker, is the respect they deserve for the job they do and the job they provide for the people of this province. And I truly am honored to stand and in this legislature as a former paramedic and hopefully support my former colleagues as much as I can, because definitely the system we see today is much better than what we had in the past, and I hope that we can see in the future more development in the province. We have one of the best services in the country, Mr. Speaker, if not one of the best in North America, Mr. Speaker, with some of the skills that the paramedics bring to the liver rooms, to the highways, in the ditches in this province, Mr. Speaker. Nova Scotians should be made well aware that they are receiving care beyond most in this country, Mr. Speaker, as recognized recently with accreditation, being the first ambulance service in Canada to be recognized for their high-quality service, not only just in the care they give to their patients, but in their fleet and their maintenance and training and education of the paramedics, Mr. Speaker. And I think it's important that we continue to respect and continue to work with the paramedic profession to promote them to be, like I say, the best in North America, Mr. Speaker. Now, I would like to say that I do like this piece of legislation. I know that the Nova Scotia College of Paramedics have reviewed this and have given their endorsement with their announcement the other day with the minister. The president at the time, Mr. Mike Kellogg, definitely is supportive of this legislation, as I am, Mr. Speaker. But a couple of the concerns I'd like to bring forward is revolving around the setup of this college will create definitely a fee or a charge on the paramedics. And I understand that fee isn't in the piece of legislation. That's something that needs to come later with regulation and that part of the process when going through enacting a bill like this. But I just want to emphasize to the Minister of Health and to government that paramedics need to be addressed and need to have input in this, and that they come forward with a reasonable amount of money or a reasonable fee when it comes to the professional fees that paramedics are going to be paying, Mr. Speaker. And paramedics are well aware of the creation of a college. Definitely is going to be a cost incurred on them, but they fought hard over the last 5, 6, 7 years to get to where they're at today, especially with some of the wages and benefits they see. And I hope that by enacting this, that it doesn't bring them back a step, Mr. Speaker. We need to go forward with this, and we need really to recognize the service we get and compensate the paramedics adequately enough, Mr. Speaker. And I hope that with the creation of this fee and the regulations that are going to be following this piece of legislation, the paramedics are truly involved in that, Mr. Speaker. I think that's an important part of this, because far too often we see with pieces of legislation that comes through government here in Nova Scotia, throughout the country, that the last people they check with are the people that those pieces of legislation affect, Mr. Speaker. And I think it's time in this province, and definitely time across this country, that the paramedic profession are looked at as being individuals that can put put input into great pieces of legislation throughout this country and in this province, Mr. Speaker. So definitely I want to congratulate the government for bringing this forward. It's been a few years now, and many years in the working, and many hours of paramedics looking over some of the lines in the piece of legislation, and I'm encouraged to see where this will take us down the road. I'm encouraged to see that we are finally standing up, or government is finally standing up and respecting the practice of paramedicines. And I look forward to the continuing commitment from this government to do the right thing when it comes to this profession. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for allowing me to make these comments.
Hear, hear.
Thank you. The honourable member for Cape Breton Noble, an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today in the West Gallery we have a visitor. Mr. Speaker, we have the Honourable Minister of Energy, Cecil Clark's constituency assistant, Adrian Gordon, taking in the proceedings today. I would like for him to stand and receive a warm welcome of the House, Mr. Speaker.
Certainly welcome our special gallery today and hope he enjoys the proceedings. The Honourable Member for Glace Bay has the floor.
I welcome our visitor to the gallery as well, too, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise on behalf of the Liberal caucus and speak to this bill, number 158, the Paramedics Act. Mr. Speaker, this is a bill that is all about recognizing the profession of paramedicine. And we as a province, I must say, have progressed leap years with respect to emergency health services. As my colleague from Sackville-Cobequid made reference to, he once worked for a system that did not have paramedicine. A long, long time ago, Mr. Speaker, I worked for that very same system, and fortunately for those who are very sick, I chose another career. Mr. Speaker, it has been a tremendous leap of progress that we've made, thanks to the foresight, I must say, in particular, of a previous Liberal government, and I don't say that glibly because certainly one of the foremost people in this province in establishing this system of paramedicine was the former Health Minister, Dr. Ron Stewart. And he gave us one of the best emergency systems in the world, which is a comment which was once attributed to the former Health Minister in this current government, as a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker. You know, it was from the vision brought forward by the previous Liberal government to the professionals both providing hands-on direct pre-hospital emergency and to those managing the program. Nova Scotians should be proud to have amongst us such a professional and dedicated group of individuals. And Mr. Speaker, it clearly speaks as to why we need to take the next step today by debating this piece of legislation. Mr. Speaker, we have professionalized and licensed doctors, nurses, and LPNs, so it's now time to extend the same courtesies and protection to both the public and to our paramedics as well. Mr. Speaker, as again my colleague from Sackville-Cobequid made reference to, there was a time in this House when we had to stand and defend our paramedics. What my honourable colleague forgot to mention is the fact that the Liberal caucus was there to stand and defend paramedics at that time as well, Mr. Speaker. As a matter of fact, I can recall as a rookie in this House during the strike by paramedics that one of the greatest speeches I've ever heard made in this House to date was given by the then member for Cape Breton North, the Honourable Russell McClellan, Mr. Speaker. One of the greatest speeches I've ever heard defending the rights of paramedics was made in this very House by that member, Mr. Speaker, at the time. Mr. Speaker, this is a bill about licensing, it's a bill about professionalism, it's a bill about protection. But I would caution the government, Mr. Speaker, that it's very important to pay attention to the content of a letter that was submitted regarding this bill by the College of Registered Nurses. And they are very wise to bring to the attention of government their desire to play an active role in the development of regulations, and in particular those regulations that pertain to the scope of practice. Mr. Speaker, government has to listen to the nurses and allow them to play a role in the development of regulations. And I hope that the Minister is receptive to their request put forward in that letter, and I look forward to hearing more from the Minister on this matter. Mr. Speaker, I would be remiss as well if I didn't, before I conclude my remarks today, pay tribute to Dr. Dave Petrie and Dr. Ed Kane for all of their hard work and dedication to the profession of emergency health in general and to this piece of legislation in particular. And I think, Mr. Speaker, that we as legislators owe both of those individuals a debt of gratitude. So in closing, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Liberal caucus, I am pleased to support this bill so that it can move along to the Law Amendments Committee. Thank you.
Recognized Honourable Minister of Health is to close debate on Bill number 158. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the honourable members opposite for their contribution to the debate. The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid gave a very interesting history and insight into the profession of paramedicine as practiced in this province. Certainly his first-hand experience is something that contributes considerably to the to the practice or the enlightenment of members of the House with respect to this subject matter. Mr. Speaker, I can assure the honourable member for Glace Bay that indeed we are cognizant of the desires of other professions to be involved in the process, and that is why we have included a member of the nursing profession in the original board of directors that will be set up with respect to the governance of the college. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid chose to cast some dispersions across the way with respect to the behaviour of members of this House on a previous debate that occurred within the House. I would simply remind the honourable member, Mr. Speaker, that during the course of his very eloquent remarks here this morning, I noted that 2 laptops were open and being used on his section of the House. I noted several conversations taking place on his side of the House while he was speaking, Mr. Speaker, and for him to suggest that that behavior is somehow inappropriate to occur in this side of the House, but it's all right to occur in his side of the House, Mr. Speaker, is not what I would consider to be fair comment. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, I'm quite pleased to conclude the debate on second reading.
Second reading of Bill number 158. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 158, entitled An Act Respecting the Practice of Paramedicine.
Will this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments? The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, would you please call Bill number 161, the Special Places Protection Act?
Bill number 161. The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to move second reading of Bill 161 of the Special Places Protection Act. In our Green Plan, we've committed to protecting more of Nova Scotia's natural environment, and we've had some recent successes, including the announcement last month of Gully Lake and Egg Mountain as wilderness areas. The amendments will update the legislation, allowing us to designate new nature reserves and to do it more efficiently than we've done in the past. There are currently 11 in the province now, Mr. Speaker. They total more than 3,100 hectares, and some are on Crown land and some are on private land. Like wilderness areas, they're protected from activities like forestry and vehicle use, and Nova Scotians are certainly welcome to visit them. We're proposing reestablishing a committee with an updated membership and a slightly changed role to provide advice on nature reserves. And we're doing this because we're currently restricted in terms of designating new nature reserves with our existing legislation. In order to designate a nature reserve, the Act requires that a management plan be developed first and that a Special Places Advisory Committee assist in developing that plan. These requirements make the process to designate nature reserves more cumbersome than it needs to be. Plus, there have been numerous shifts in responsibilities for the various special places covered by the Act. So as a result, the Advisory Committee no longer exists, and in fact, it can exist as outlined in the legislation currently. So we're proposing to reestablish the committee in a structure and role that will support the protective efforts. Also, our proposal is to remove the requirement for a management plan to be developed before a nature reserve can be designated. A management plan gives extra guidance beyond the statements in the Act to ensure an area is properly managed, but not all nature reserves require this. So making management plans optional and allowing them to be done once a nature reserve is already under the protection of the Act gives us more flexibility to protect land and to do it faster. So with these amendments, designating nature reserves will happen and can happen more quickly and more efficiently, so we certainly need the changes. Currently, we have a number of Nova Scotians who have offered pieces of their own private land to be protected as nature reserves, but our hands have been tied because of outdated legislation. And with this, we hope to update the legislation and make this a possibility. About 8.2% of land in Nova Scotia is protected through the combined efforts of the provincial and federal governments, as well as organizations like the Nature Conservancy of Canada and the Nova Scotia Nature Trust. We need to make these amendments so that we can protect more of Nova Scotia's natural treasures for our children and our grandchildren to enjoy. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move second reading.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to stand up today and talk about Bill 161. I did have an opportunity with Department of Environment Labor staff to be briefed on this bill a couple of weeks ago. And they did explain to myself that the reasons for doing this were, so I'll mention some of the reasons as follows. That the way the bill was written, it did present a barrier in that it took a fairly long time for the process to go from beginning to end. That they wanted to make these changes so that they could add new sites and move them forward at a quicker pace. They were telling us that right now, the way the previous bill was written, it was too cumbersome, and that people that had private land in Nova Scotia found it quite a hardship to go through the process, because these people, have their own lives and families and et cetera, that they're dealing with on a daily basis. And apparently this management plan that they had to go through previously was quite long, drawn out. And from my understanding, there has not been any advisory committee for quite a while right now in the province of Nova Scotia. Now, I could be mistaken on that. And I believe the reasons we were told were that the way the bill was written, it was very specific as to who had to be on that advisory committee, and it was getting harder and harder all the time, I guess, for the government to get people on this committee. And I can understand that, because being on the Human Resource Committee for the province of Nova Scotia, we do have an issue in this province of getting people on these various agencies, boards, and commissions. And I'm assuming this advisory committee was probably facing the same problems that I still see in being on this Human Resource Committee. So, Mr. Speaker, we were told actually that there is a backlog of perhaps maybe 70 or so areas that we may be able to move forward.
Order, please. There's too much noise in the chamber. I ask the members to take their conversations outside, please. Honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Speaker, as I was saying, staff, I do believe, told us that there's 70 or so areas that we may be able to move forward much more quickly than under the old process. And I think that's good news for everybody in Nova Scotia. The amendment will actually allow for the future protection of these lands also, so that if the person that donates this land to the government for protection passes away, which we all will, it is guaranteed to be passed on as a protected area, even though if, say, their grandchildren end up with this in a will or whatever, and they don't agree with protecting this area, it's not in their hands anymore, and that it will be protected. And I believe that's the way they planned on having this go through. As the minister did mention, the previous process was quite long and drawn out, and I believe it could have taken anywhere from 2 years or more to go through this process with this advisory committee. So from what he was saying the other day at the public information session that he held, it's now going to take somewhere between 6 and 12 months to go through the process, which is a lot shorter, and hopefully these 70 places will move along quickly. So, as I said, the reason that the government's looking at doing this is to protect more land on into the future for us and our children. The minister apparently can, through this new bill, he can actually formulate this plan through staff on his own without the help of the committee. Although I'm hoping that we will move forward quickly in forming a committee, because it's always good to have the public input. And especially, I'm hoping that we will get public input from the actual communities around perhaps the areas that are going to come forward to look for protection. And the way I understand it is that the management plan would revolve around the uniqueness of each area that was going to be protected, so that the reason this bill's come forward is that some places are very remote and that they perhaps don't need a very detailed management plan because they're not accessible to a lot of people. But then you may have an area that's very close to, say, a public beach or somewhere that people can access it very quickly, and therefore it would be encroached on by a lot of the public, and therefore it may need some form of a management plan. So that was the reason for that part of the bill. The government does, I believe, hope that this bill will actually bring more people forward in the province that think this is a good idea and that are willing to donate some of their land that they now own to future generations. And Mr. Speaker, we know that the people of Nova Scotia really do believe in their land, and that we do love, this province and the land that we have been given. Mr. Speaker, we know that recently, the government has been doing its part in protecting one big chunk of land in Nova Scotia, the Gully Lake, Egg Mountain, James River Wilderness Protected Area. And that's good news for us, Mr. Speaker. As we all know, the landscape in Nova Scotia is changing, and it's changing quickly due to various things like urban sprawl and the clear cutting that goes on in Nova Scotia. And we have a lot of roads running through the province now, and there's a lot of quarries and such that really disturb the natural beauty of Nova Scotia. So this new bill is perhaps going to move us along a different road that we will follow in the future in protecting more land for everyone. We have had a history in Nova Scotia of 400 years of land clearing, and that has taken its toll on, our wildlife habitat. We've suffered a loss of wildlife habitat in Nova Scotia, and we do know that nature is under a great deal of stress right now in Nova Scotia. We have a lot of development going on in our coastal areas, and we've had people here speak about that during this session. And even, very close in HRM, we've had some of that disturbance. We're at the point now where, nature really has nowhere to go, and it's up to us to really put things in place that are going to protect our environment and, the wildlife for our future children. The Maritime Provinces actually do contain the most disturbed natural landscape according to the World Wildlife Fund's latest nature audit. And we do know that we have in Nova Scotia a very fractured landscape which contains really patches of wildlife and nature. And this government, I'm hoping, with this new bill, will be able to maybe connect some of these patches together. And I'm hoping that the Department of Environment and Labor actually does have a plan behind this bill, so that they're going to maybe design some corridors, some wildlife and nature corridors, so that when they're looking at these possible 70 new designated areas, that they will look at that in a holistic way, and maybe not have such a cookie cutter kind of system that we do now. And I'm very hopeful that that our Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour will see that and be able to move forward on that kind of a plan, because we do need to save the best of what we have left now, Mr. Speaker. As we're talking about this bill, I would like to also bring up the point where we're moving forward, or the department is moving forward on this bill to protect these possible 70 or so new areas. But at the same time, it's like the yin and yang. They're looking at, they're under review now. They're reviewing our sanctuaries in Nova Scotia. So I think they're looking at, it's around 26 areas of protected Crown land that they're reviewing right now, Mr. Speaker. And I think it's around, well, Liscombe Sanctuary itself is over 60,000 hectares of land, and they are looking at stripping that sanctuary status away from them. So, we do have some very treasured areas in Nova Scotia that are now under review, and I think, if we're looking at adding areas, then we have to seriously look at why would we want to take some areas away, and I really question that. And I've had an awful lot of correspondence from people right across Nova Scotia, and I'm assuming that the Minister of Environment Labour also has had those same emails. And when I really did go through that review online process that you can go through, and you can see the information and you can read what they want to take off, what they add on, because I will give them credit. They are adding on some areas, but I think when I added up the numbers, and I could be wrong, more is leaving than what is coming on. And it's disturbing to me what I really found the most disturbing was the wording in that review, that some of these areas contain no unique wildlife, and I think in Nova Scotia, everybody, most people would agree that everything in Nova Scotia is unique. Every living creature has a uniqueness of its own, Mr. Speaker. So I think maybe some of that wording needs to be changed, and I don't think we can afford here in this province to lose anything that we already have tried to save. And maybe, we need some new management plans for these areas, but I really feel, we can't just sort of throw them off with one hand and then try and add these 70 places on with the other hand. It doesn't make sense to me, and I don't know if anybody else here would agree with that, but to me it just doesn't make sense that we're talking here today about a good thing, about adding 70 places on, and then on the other hand, I don't understand why we're looking at removing places. I mean, some of these sanctuaries were set up to protect maybe certain kinds of wildlife or a certain kind of habitat. And I'm assuming that unless we've gone in and clear-cut these areas or some drastic thing has happened, and if that's occurred, then we shouldn't have allowed that to occur. But if that's what's happened, then we need to make sure that doesn't happen to the existing ones we have left, and that the wildlife that is there, we do need to set up mechanisms to protect what is left in those areas. So I'm hoping that today, when we're looking at this bill, it's going to, jog our memory and let us remember that even though we want to do something good here, we can't, forget about what we've already tried to do, because if we've tried to set up these sanctuaries and for some reason that department is telling us that they have failed in their efforts to really either protect them, keep them going at when they set them up, something has occurred that has now made them change their mind to say that these places are no longer unique. So if we're going to go ahead and protect these 70 or so different areas under this new bill, what has changed? That's the question. What has the government changed in their planning or management process that is going to allow us to do things differently? And maybe, the minister can talk to me later and let me know what the department is going to be doing differently. When I look over the notes that I just scribbled down here today, that our Honourable Minister of Environment Labour has spoken about, certainly, I can agree with him that we need to add more nature reserves. Yes, if we only have 11, that's what he's saying. And that certainly these are places that I agree we shouldn't have any vehicle use on, and that we are going to reestablish the committee, but that they're going to have new roles, and that it's not going to be as hard to set these committees up. So when he's telling us that they're restricted in designation now and that the management can come later, I do have to, that's fine to say that let's protect them first and then set up the management plan later. But if you look back at what's happened with our sanctuaries, and that hasn't worked, because I'm assuming they had some kind of a plan, and the plan didn't work. And now we're saying we're going to look at 70 new places, and we're going to do the plan later, because we want to be quick about this. We want to get these places designated because people want to donate them to us. Then, you know what I'm saying? I'm just saying that I just want the minister and his department to be very cognizant that the plan does have to come, even if it's a small plan and it's a basic management plan to protect that area. That I don't want them just to leave that on the back burner and say, well, you know, the bill is written in a way that we may never have to have a plan. So I do think we do need a plan. And as I said, I hope that we do reestablish the committee, because I do believe in public input, and I think that's so very important, especially in the communities that would be affected by these future maybe 70 places. So I agree, it's a more flexible bill. It's going to move things along faster. I agree with him on that, and that it hopefully will be more efficient. And that certainly if people do have land to offer, let's hear from them. And I know that the yesterday at the briefing, the Nova Scotia Nature Trust group were in, and they're very happy to see this, because it is going to speed things along, because they have had their hands tied, I believe. And that the Nature Conservancy, they're, I believe, behind this too. And the Ecology Action Center, we were talking to them yesterday. So even though I think this bill is good, I hope today that I have pointed out some of the reasons why we have to, you know, still we can't rush into anything here, because we are talking about future wildlife and nature in Nova Scotia, which I know I hold near and dear to my heart, and I think all of us here in this room do. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I recognize the honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise on behalf of the Liberal caucus and make a few comments about this piece of legislation that I think has been long overdue. I want to thank the Minister and the staff of his department for a briefing which gave us a very good understanding of where legislation has been and where it is moving towards. And considering that we just have 11 nature reserves in the province, this piece of legislation will help to streamline the process, and I think that certainly is a very, very good thing. The concept of a management plan is again a worthy requirement when we move forward to take a piece of land and move it into a protective state. However, this, in fact, in the past has been a stumbling block towards moving towards a larger amount of protected land in Nova Scotia. So I think that's a positive part of this piece of legislation. One of the areas that gives a great insight into how cumbersome the legislation in the past has been is, for example, McFarland Woods, which is already one of the 11 nature reserves that we have in the province, and they now want to add additional lands to this reserve, and this has now been some time in the making. So once again, this will allow the department to move forward in a more timely fashion for acquisition of land to go in conjunction with existing reserves. But more importantly, it is going to open up the door for Nova Scotians who have had a tremendous interest in leaving a special and unique natural area for their personal legacy, but for future generations. And we've been in a real stall period, I feel, with the way the committee has not been active, and too many departments that had to try to work together to bring a new piece of land into the protected state. This now will leave, yes, representatives of the department, but one minister. You won't have to have the ministerial involvement directly of each of the ministers. And so I think this is going to be another way of facilitating protected lands here in Nova Scotia. Certainly in our area, the Annapolis Valley, I know a couple of individuals with tracts of land who have wanted to do this, who wanted to have a piece of land set aside for future Nova Scotians, and again have found the process to be one that is very a great deal of time required in order to get this approved. So I think more than anything, this is going to be a signal to Nova Scotians that the province is indeed interested in protecting the special and unique areas that we do have. And I think you'll see a number of Nova Scotians who will come forth with small and medium and perhaps even large tracts of land that can go into protected spaces. My hope certainly is that this will not be a trade-off, that sanctuaries such as Liscombe and Blandford will not be delisted and be lost for future generations. So I hope that certainly we can move in concert here. The Wildlife Act, as well as the Protected Spaces Act, will allow, I think, for a considerable amount of new lands to come into protection. This is talking certainly about our future areas. We have a lot of pressure on our natural spaces in Nova Scotia. When you consider that there are 50,000 hectares of land that are clear-cut each year, this is an enormous pressure point. When you consider, as I put in a resolution yesterday, that only 0.008 of old-growth forests remain. So I think Nova Scotians are looking to the legislators to be more cognizant of the areas that we do need to protect. So with that, and I know my colleague has a few comments to make as well, I want to thank the Minister and his department for wanting to update and to give Nova Scotians, I think, a very streamlined approach to getting more land into protected spaces. So with that, I take my place, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Fellow member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to take a moment to congratulate the government for bringing this forward, and also to just reiterate the importance of special places, of protected areas, of preserving natural lands in our province from one end of the province to the other. My particular interest in rising today is to speak about the Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes area, which is 1,700 hectares of land in the, or 1,700 acres, I believe, in the heart, really, of Clayton Park and moving towards Timberley and on to Hammonds Plains. It's a very large horseshoe of Crown land surrounded by private lands, and at this point, in some places, boxed in by development because of the value of those lands and the beauty of them as well. There are many, many lakes and watercourses that cross those lands. And in the areas that are privately owned, there's a big demand to build homes and expand the city of Halifax in that direction. And as a former city councillor, I was there and heard the discussions about a lot of new subdivisions that were being proposed. And many times a subdivision coming before HRM Council will be 1,000 new homes or 1,000 new units and lots being developed. And so the development pressure is very great, and in my own district of Clayton Park, and in that riding, we've developed right up to the highway, to the Bicentennial Highway, and a big question among my residents and citizens there is, when is it going to jump the highway and begin the very same dense population on the other side of the highway? And also in that area, we have Bears Lake Business Park, which is still has a lot of room for expansion. And again, these Crown lands, and just for the knowledge of the House, the Crown lands begin directly behind Bayers Lake Business Park. In fact, you can park at Kent Building Supplies and go straight into the woods behind there, and within a few steps you're on Crown land. And people aren't aware just how close that large piece of wilderness is to a very large population of people who could enjoy it in future. So some months ago, actually in the last session of the House in the fall, I had introduced an amendment to the Wilderness Areas Protection Act, asking that these lands, the Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes lands, be included in that act as an amendment to the act so that they would get proper protection. And the reason I'm raising it again today is perhaps they should be under the Special Places Protection Act. All I know is that part of land is really probably the number one area that's threatened within all of the Crown lands in HRM. And the reason I'm focusing on HRM is that development pressure within our municipality is creating a hunger for land and also escalating the value of that land to the point where it becomes very attractive as an asset to the government. While it's sitting under the designation of just being controlled by the Department of Natural Resources, as we know, land can be logged and mined and used for other purposes, even though it's Crown-owned. And what I would like to see is that the land that's under the most development pressure and has the most benefit to the largest number of people for our future be looked at as kind of a critical area for our members and the government to consider in a special category. So in other words, what I am suggesting is that all of the Crown land in the urban core of HRM, and this would be considered urban core, in the Timberley area there are services, there's sewer and water services, and they are taxed as an urban core community. And I believe that land that's that close to thousands of people and could be such an asset to the future in terms of our health, recreational opportunities, and environment, and in terms of improving our environment, I think needs to be looked at specially, and I really am urging the government to consider it again in terms of making some sort of special designation and acknowledgement of the pressure that's on those lands and the importance that they will play in the future. And that is not to diminish the importance of special places around our province, because I know in every community you go to, and we talked today about the Blandford Peninsula, I know that although the population there is much smaller, that those lands also are accessible to many and very important to the communities in which they are located. So I'm really not suggesting that we don't look at special places elsewhere. I simply want to sound the alarm that within our urban core, there are Crown lands. They're becoming ever more valuable in terms of their dollar value because they are very developable. And the development community is very interested in acquiring more lands in that part of Nova Scotia, in the mainland part of Halifax, which, as I've described, is just the upper part of the Clayton Park riding. And that development pressure will continue because we've had a lot of growth in our city. And I can say, as a 15-year resident of Clayton Park West, it's amazing to see how quickly an entire community can unfold and materialize. And when I moved there were only a few houses in Clayton Park West, and 15 years later, you have a community of approximately 10,000 people living just within the boundaries of Dunbrack, Lacewood, and the Bicentennial Highway. So the development comes fast and furiously, and it's a good thing. It means that our city's growing, that there are jobs, and there are reasons for people to be moving here. But at the same time, the people I'm talking to who are those newcomers, and some of the residents who've lived there for a longer period of time, are asking that we take steps here in the legislature to look down the road and recognize the value of having open wilderness spaces in our area. We don't just want ball fields and that sort of thing. We want places that are natural, that our people can go to. And as I say, with a short walk from Bayers Lake Business Park, you can be into beautiful, pristine lakes. People go there swimming. They go there to picnic. In the winter, they go there to skate. And it's just a gem to have so close to so many people. And so again, I think that all the moves that the government make to recognize the need to preserve our special places, and again, it should be mentioned that as a province, we have some of probably the second lowest, I think, percentage of Crown land in our entire province. I believe PEI is the only one with less Crown land. And it is because, as the member from Dartmouth East mentioned, we've had 400 years of occupation and living in this province and clearing land and commerce and so on. And so we've lost a great deal of our public land that should be there for the public good and for the future. So again, I do commend the government for looking at advancing the cause of special places and streamlining the process to allow these lands to be designated. I think, frankly, we're at a crisis point in terms of getting lands put under proper protection so that we can really have time to look to the future about how these lands will be used and how important they are. You know, I can imagine in this particular area, many people will think, oh, that's far away, that's, you know, out of sight. But if you consider, again, that how quickly Clayton Park riding has grown and how quickly Hammonds Plains has grown and Timberley, it will not be long before all those lands are totally hemmed in by development. And if we allow that value as it grows and the land becomes more valuable, it becomes very tempting to use that land as well to trade off for other purposes. To sell it because it can bring in good money to the province for some other project, or to trade it off for another interest in another part of the province. In fact, a number of years ago, the land was being seriously considered by the government for a trade-off for Cape Split. And that's a very important public place as well. Everybody loves the hiking, and the view is majestic. It's a wonderful landmark and feature in our province, and I think Cape Split should be publicly owned. However, I object, and I'm glad to see the government thought more wisely of it. They did not, at the end of the day, trade off lands in Halifax to accomplish that goal. But the temptation will always be there unless the land is properly designated, unless it gets put into or under the protection of an act that means it has been recognized as special, unique, important to our future. And in that category, any such discussions about sale or trading or expand or loss of public lands would come under public scrutiny, because it would become something that the public would then have more involvement in, just as we have had a lot of public consultation about the game sanctuaries and about the other lands that have been discussed. You know, at least in that category, because they were special areas as game sanctuaries, the public has had an opportunity to know what the government is thinking of and to respond and to let you know how much it means in terms of their lifestyle and their future and their hopes for their own children having access to those public lands. So again, I think it is a positive thing to streamline the process, to reestablish the committee for the Special Places Advisory Committee. I think all of those are very laudable, and again, I would like to suggest that all of the public lands within the urban core of Halifax Regional Municipality be seriously considered as hotspots for development and as land that should be right now set aside under a special provision, so that no land will be lost in the next few years when we're experiencing such rapid development. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I recognize the honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be brief. I have to say that I appreciate the remarks from the member from Halifax Clayton Park. I think for all members of the House that we should pay attention to areas in the province that are developing fairly rapidly. HRM definitely is that area. I have certainly part of my constituency in what we refer to as the corridor from Enfield to Shubenacadie has seen very rapid growth in the past few years, and this issue of protecting spaces is a very important one, because once they're gone, there's no getting them back. And if there isn't a plan to ensure that there are some protected areas, and there will always be a conflict. There will always be those who will see some gain to themselves if they could develop those pieces of land. And it's incumbent upon governments to ensure that that land is kept for the greater good, which is for all the people in the province or in the city or for whatever particular area. And something I want to applaud the government for the changes they've made and their work on this Special Places Protection Act.
The honourable member introduction. Thank you. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park on the introduction.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I should have done this when I was up earlier and I wasn't aware of it. But in the gallery today, we are very happy to have with us some students from Clayton Park Junior High. They are grade 9 students. I think there are 17 with us today, and they're with their teacher, Jonathan Murphy, and Robert de la Chevretière. I wonder if you could stand and just to be recognized and welcome to the House. And,
Thank you. We certainly welcome our special guest to the gallery today.
member from Hans East for allowing me to interrupt. Thank you very much.
The honourable member Hans East has the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the guests in the gallery. So I'm pleased that the government has made this move to make this process less cumbersome and perhaps more encouraging for anyone who's considering having their land given special protection for generations to come. What I would like to say to the government is that the government has a responsibility on its own to protect land, and the government has a responsibility actually, and I would encourage them whenever possible to add to their Crown holdings. My fear, obviously, would be that what the government does add to its Crown holdings, then the government has the right to do with it as it sees fit. And I would not be encouraging the government to add to its Crown holdings to encourage more clear-cutting on those holdings. But I think that in the interest, one of the interests of the people of Nova Scotia would be that the government add to its Crown holdings for all Nova Scotians. And as far as protected spaces go in this province, Mr. Speaker, there is a national target of 12%, and that's a minimum. And we presently are at 8%, and so the province can go a long way in terms of setting aside those areas that would be deemed special and should be protected. And to this point, actually, there doesn't seem to be a great appetite on part of the government to do very much of that. James River, Egg Mountain, the announcement that the Minister of Environment had made a couple of weeks ago. This is a very positive step, and I know the people who have been lobbying for this for some time are very pleased, and I'd be very interested to, when the minister finally gets all the boundaries and the work done on those spaces, to really see that get finalized. But that's a big step, an important step, and it's not been made clear, I think, to us and to Nova Scotians, what kind of trade-offs or whatever arrangements were made. I know there were some concerns over Crown allocations to some of the mills that would have had access in that area. And I think we'd like to know just what exactly that means for Nova Scotians and for other areas that we'd like to see protected. I don't think we're interested in seeing a trade-off that we save those, but we annihilate some other sensitive area. And the Minister of Natural Resources would be the one, I think, most aware on the present review that's going on the nature reserves and wilderness areas and sanctuaries, that we're quite concerned about his department's comments around the delisting of those areas, and that they don't serve the features that they were first designed. The ministers should be aware, and I think all Nova Scotians would agree, that at the time that those sites were set aside to be designated as unique as sanctuaries and as wildlife management areas, we had a fair bit of wilderness in Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. And that was at a time when Nova Scotians actually, probably the population of this province, the percentage of the population that was more rural was much greater. They had a much closer connection to the wilderness, and because of that, even in those times when we had lots of wilderness area, they saw a need to have those areas set aside. And now, in the 21st century, when we have significant clear cutting in the province. We have certainly much more development in the province and much greater pressure on wilderness areas, that the province would actually look at delisting these areas at a time when we would require greater protection for them. And I cannot understand the minister's view that that would indicate that perhaps these should be delisted, and it would certainly be our hope that the government would go in the opposite direction and offer greater protection of these areas, and in particular because they're already under Crown. So with those few comments, Mr. Speaker, I'll take my seat and listen to whatever other members want to say. So,
Recognize. The member for Halifax Atlantic.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move adjournment of the debate until the following day.
Is it agreed? Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Government House Leader. Who's taking it quick? Go ahead. Order, please. Okay. Motion to adjourn debate. Is it agreed? No? Okay. I recognize the Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour to close debate on Bill 161.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Certainly appreciate the comments made by the members opposite. I know we've had some briefings and information. Encourage them to contact the department if they have any other questions as we move this through. Do appreciate the comments that were made, and I would like to close debate on Bill 161.
Motion is to move second reading of Bill number 161. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried.
161, title an act to amend Chapter 438 of the revised statutes 1989, the Special Places Protection Act.
This bill will be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House to now rise to meet again on Monday at the hour of 4 p.m. The House will sit until 10 p.m. The order of business will be public bills for second reading and committee of the whole House on bills.
Motion is the House adjourned to 4 p.m. on Monday. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried. The House is adjourned until 4 p.m. Monday.